We're in the midst of a huge transformation where peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I'm very excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Britteny Soto. She is the Director of Talent Acquisition, JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Enablement at Encamp. Britteny, thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah. So Brittany Soto, yes, I use she, her pronouns, she, her, hers. And I love this question because I was thinking about it last night. I was like, man, I wanted to be some pretty extravagant things when I was young. I really was a big thinker. I would go between wanting to be a teacher, which is very yes, cool. But then I also wanted to be a detective and I also wanted to be on Broadway. So somehow I wanted to be all of those things. I think I got my reality check, especially for the detective thing when I learned you had to be a police officer first. I was like, no, thank you. And thank you. And then like a teacher, sadly, I mean, I did start my career as an education major. And I had a professor who was not the most supportive. That was like, no, you shouldn't be a teacher, freshman year. And I'm like, I'm so impressionable when at that age. And so I kind of dropped it, but I'm kind of glad that I did because I still get to teach, just not traditional way. But so I'll come back to you on the Broadway thing. I'm still working on that one. Honestly.
Please, please. I just went to Ellen Stardust Diner over here in New York, and I expect to see you up there on the Broadway show. So we love to see
One
it.
day, Taraji P. Henson wasn't but 40 almost when she became famous. So I got time.
Absolutely. It is never too late, it's never too early to
Right.
start. Fast forward to today, you're in talent acquisition, JEDI, enablement. It's in the title of our interview series today, this dynamic thing, company culture. We spend a lot of time generally working, so it's really important the environment that we're in. When we think about company culture, what are qualitative and quantitative ways you think about measuring this, seeing the progress, how people are feeling?
Yeah, this has certainly changed over the years, right? The way we even think about company culture has completely changed. It's nothing like it used to be. One thing that still rings to be pretty true and a pretty consistent way of measurement is always going to be surveys, right? Surveys, albeit that some people are see a survey and they can man, they've dreaded. They don't want to do another survey, right? So I think this whole thing about like pulse surveying and things like that are really nice, digestible ways. But I think we completely undervalue the meaningfulness of a good stay chat, right? Internal interviews, talking to people like, how you doing? How you feeling? Like, you still like, did you make a good choice? Like every I always check in with my hires and I'm like, you feel like you made the right choice? And they're like, oh, yeah, 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 yeah. And so I think those types of things are important too. I think also tracking your peer recognition program, if you hopefully have one in place, I think checking the engagement on that also is a really good temperature test, I guess, of culture. But I think before you do any of that stuff, I think you have to define what you mean, right, by company culture, because every company is very different. And so I think making it very clear to your workforce, whatever that workforce is, that culture is important. This is how we define it, and this is how we measure it. I think you can't do much until you make it very clear that that's something that's important. And I think you might get a lot more responses when you make that clear as well.
Absolutely. There are a lot of ways to keep in touch with how things are going, and really defining a framework for success and really what we mean by company culture is important as that foundation. I know since the pandemic started, a lot of folks are saying they have a people first approach. They really value flexibility or really empathy in leaders, but sometimes it doesn't really align with the actions or what's celebrated. And it's really hard to put into practice. From your perspective, what is taking that human or people first approach look like in the employee experience in a really, authentic way?
Yeah, 100%. I think understanding where people are in their lives is incredibly important, right? Um, we are now in a completely different world. Hey, welcome to my new house where I still have paint swatches on the wall. Like, like, is that good? Let me know. So it's, so I think we have to kind of get out of our heads a little bit when it comes to being employers, being organizations, and really realize that people aren't making work their first priority anymore. And we can't get in our feelings about that as companies. Like we can't like be feeling some type of way. Like you're gonna need those people. You still want those skilled, amazing humans. Their priorities just shifted. We all went through group trauma. We changed our perspective on work. Like we got to live with that and see it from that point forward. It can't be how we used to be. We can't think that going back to the office is going to magically make it how it used to be, right? This is the world we're in now. How do we approach that? Just like any other thing, just like you would a customer, right? If a customer or client tells you, well, this is where we are, you're going to flex and mold that product sale accordingly. I think it's to be the same way with your people, right? And so a human first approach is really seeing people in their humanness as parents, as pet owners, as caretakers, as everything that they are, and stop trying to be so focused on their happiness, because in reality we can't control that as employers. But what we can control is how healthy our work environment is and how that may contribute to someone's happiness, right? Hopefully. And so that's really what I think of. How you put that into practice is really, again, understanding your people. So instead of your typical engagement survey, it's more of, we just launched our first demographic survey. And this was more than just, oh, tell me your nationality, your race, your EEOC stuff, right? This was also, what's your caretaker status? What is English your first language? Are you first generation? College, all these things, right? To kind of take a temperature of the facet of the human so that we can approach our programming, our benefits, all of those things around that, as opposed to what we preconceived thoughts of what employees need. It's not the same anymore. I hope that answers the question, but that's more of like what I think of when I think of that.
Yeah, it definitely answers the question. And it also speaks to the point where we can't take a one size fits all approach to everything, too, because to your point as well, people are at a different point of their careers, different life experience. And I think to know if someone is a caretaker or a parent or a pet owner, or to know the things that are going on in people's lives, they have to feel psychologically safe, feel like
Right.
they belong at a company from day one or day negative one when they are in that kid
Yep.
experience. Anytime someone relates to your employer, brand new, or comes into contact with your organization as well. In preparation for our interview, I saw that you were named one of Untapp's top diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging leaders of 2022. Congrats. How do you approach the talent acquisition specifically process with that equity driven lens?
Yeah. So thank you, first and foremost. I love Untap. They are a great partner, and I'm proud that they have that award. And really the first I've seen like it. So excited to be a part of that group. Um, especially in the TA process, a lot, this is not popular, right? We give candidates a lot of information. um, I, I don't know why it's not popular, no shade, but like we give candidates a lot of information. I actually come from a staffing, kind of a weird mixed background, but I did do a stint in staffing. And one thing we used to do in staffing was prep candidates. Now, of course, this had certainly a benefit for you, the staffer that brought home a big paycheck of commission. You want to make sure that that person got the job. But I always questioned and wondered why it was like we didn't do that internal recruitment. And I do realize that you don't want to give too much of an unfair advantage, but I do think you can give it an equitable baseline. So we give candidates loads of information. This is what you're going to be assessed on this part of the interview process. And this is who you're going to meet. And this is why you're going to meet that person. And, you get all this information and candidates are like, wow, like that really took a burden off of me because I knew exactly what I was going into. I think so many companies treat the interview process as some kind of like weird song and dance and like this hurdle you have to achieve, and it's like it's so hard to work here, like rah, like that's some type of thing that you should be proud of, when in reality it's like, what are you making people do? Like it's nerve-wracking, it's not okay. So we prep them, we give them a lot of information at every stage, and we don't lead with a whole bunch of anonymization. Now I know this is a really touchy topic when it comes to diversity hiring, anonymize or not anonymize. You know, the reason why a partner like Untapped works out is because we don't anonymize. We want to see those differences. We want to see those beautiful things that make you who you are. Hello, I'm Brittany. I am an LGBTQ community. I'm Black. I am first gen college. All these things, like, see that. See that. I worked hard. See that. And so I think because we don't shy away from that, again, that's given that baseline comfort. There are stages where anonymization work, right? At the skill assessment, things of that sort. You want to make sure that there's a baseline, but simple things like preparing candidates, also preparing your interviewers. We have a culture of interviewing here at Encamp. People love interviewing. It's really weird. They like to talk to people. They want to see everybody that's going to work here. I have to turn away interviewers. Like, what is that? So, like, having that culture of excitement around interviewing and getting to know these people, and also including things like a values panel. We have a values panel that is due to assess value alignment, because we do have core values at Encamp, but that can be anybody in the company that does that interview. It doesn't have to be a member of a team you'll work on. Again, kind of opening up that process to make it less of, oh, we're assessing you and putting you through this gauntlet, and more of, you know, we want to get to know you and make sure that you learn a lot about Encamp so that you can make the decision to join us. More quantifiable KPIs are things like the fact that we have a minimum of 3 final candidates for every job. Again, to make sure that we're checking that bias without saying we're checking the bias, right? We want to make sure that that's an equitable process. And then you certainly can't shy away from, you know, a consistent process, making sure that it's incredibly structured.
Yeah, again, having that structure, those non-negotiables in place, making sure other folks are part of the process too, to mitigate bias as much as possible. And love your point too. What a novel idea, preparing candidates as much as you can for the interview process, not trying to trick everyone, giving folks the most information they have as well, especially when you're meeting multiple people, and why you're interviewing with them as well is so important. The next step is when you are, you know, it's your first day, first 90 days, you're trying to meet folks and really build that level of trust, just like any relationship, kind of connect with folks as well. I want to ask how you create those meaningful moments of connection, specifically in a distributed or remote workplace. I know there's different schools of thought around the quote unquote water cooler kitchen moments, and remote happy hour, all of those things, remote coffees. What are your thoughts on creating that connection in this new workplace environment?
We're still figuring it out, frankly. You know, because you don't want it to be too cliche, right? You want it to be really meaningful, and you want it to be approachable, right? We don't want you to feel like you have to do something. A way that we've kind of done that is through the fact that we're very Slack heavy, and we have different Slack communities that kind of mimic what may have naturally occurred in the workplace, right? So anybody can start a community. We have the true crime group, we have the pets, we've got the parents, we've got the, man, we've got so many, but fantasy football just popped up, like fitness, you know, it's kind of meeting people where they are outside of their roles. I think we more than know what each other do every day. Like, we know what we do for work, but I, you know, think about back in the office days, people would gravitate towards one another, not based on the jobs that you did. It was based on the things that you have in common, right? And, you know, I think also having open Slack channels really help us as well. There are no private Slack channels at Encamp. I mean, legal's probably the one, and that's just to keep everybody safe. But like, honestly, there are no go jump in anyway. Not a parent thinking about becoming a parent, jump in parents. Come on, you'll learn all about the things, and you may make the decision to back down and wait a little bit, or maybe you will dive first, and I think those types of things have really helped. But I won't lie, this is something we're still trying to work on, because the fact of the matter is, society has taught us over the years that to make meaningful connections, you have to be in person. We know that's not true, but that also means we have to flex in a way that is really meeting the workforce now where it is, and in developing those spaces. I don't think we've got it figured out. I don't think a lot of people have got it figured out, but that's what's been helping us thus far, and putting that control in the employees. It's not HR creating these little groups, it's the employees creating these groups and inviting others to join them. And I think that really works.
And creating those authentic experiences, not forced, and really talking to people's interests as well, and giving folks opportunity to opt into those conversations too. One of the things that we are talking about too is around conscious coffees. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about that, what the goal is, and how this relates to fostering that psychological safety?
Yeah, we actually just had one this morning, right before we're connecting right now, and it was our Hispanic Heritage Month edition, and it was we watched a TED Talk from a wonderful young woman about the immigration story, and how immigration is viewed in the U.S. And how you kind of have to overcompensate and have that survival story to be validated as having an immigrant story, and now that's not true. And, these conscious coffees are really based in small, digestible nuggets of information, hearing diverse stories. And it's not really meant to educate you or say you did something wrong, or, these things, right? It's education organically. And it's through hearing the stories of people, and these are usually quiet, not a lot of people want to shout out, from the rooftops their feelings. Sometimes we do get people who are very vocal, but sometimes they're very quiet. And I get a lot of follow-up messages. Thank you so much. I felt seen. I felt heard. Thank you for telling these types of stories. Like, even though I'm not the one doing them, I'm just learning right along with them. And I think the way that fosters a psychologically safe space is, again, we're meeting it at a baseline that is based in human. It's not, oh, you did something bad, so we had an issue, so we did an unconscious bias training. No shade to the people that did that, but it's meeting the stories where they are, and allowing people to see themselves in diverse stories, because that's how we get people to feel comfortable in spaces of other people. People don't realize how alike we all are. We are way more alike than we like to believe. Again, it's not our fault, it's survival. And, I think by having these stories and opening up that space to be quiet and just listen, even, is important. Because I think also we get really caught up in, as employees, as DEI people, that we have to educate in some type of formal way as an employer, which is kind of odd. But I think it's important still, because we do work with different types of humans, and knowing those stories are important. So that's the Conscious Coffee series. Like little things like emoji reactions in place of speaking, again, it's more meaningful when you could just hear the stories from people that you don't work with. That's another thing. The reason why they're TED Talks and not our employees telling their stories is because it's not the employee's job to do that. We can find that stuff other places. But if I have an employee that wants to tell their story, oh boy, say it. Yes.
Absolutely. It is not anyone's responsibility, or nobody's entitled to anyone's story too. But if you create an environment where somebody wants to raise their hand, that's great as well. So thank you for sharing a little bit about what conscious coffees look like too. We've mentioned it kind of a few times throughout the conversation, especially when we're talking about company culture, but want to ask directly too around what role does the both candidate and employee voice play in your overall kind of talent acquisition JEDI strategy at Encamp?
It's the only way we can measure if we're doing it right. We do a candidate survey right after you complete your process, whether you receive an offer or not. And we look at that data all the time. Shout out Greenhouse, because they really make it easy to do that. And we also do the 30-day survey after you've started. Like, is this job what you thought it would be? Are these people who you thought they were? And I think those two buckets of feedback have shaped the process thus far and continues to shape. The process cannot be a one size fit all. Like, this is what it is forevermore. Like, no, we make iterations quarterly. We report on those iterations quarterly to make sure that we are doing exactly what we should be doing. That's how we got things like the anonymization of the skills assessment, is through some of that feedback. We also are getting feedback from, excuse me, the interview teams. But yeah, the candidate and the especially new Encampers for us are incredibly crucial. And I'm always looking at that Glassdoor. I'm always looking at the comments, and we try to do our best to make sure everybody knows where they are. We set some really ridiculous standards on like getting back to people, but it's all accountability and making sure that we're doing right by the candidate, because job searching is hard.
It is hard. It is literally a full-time job as well. And it sounds like, you're creating the environment where candidates and employees feel like their voices are heard, demonstrating that you're actively kind of listening and really value that feedback too. Based on our conversation today, it sounds like there are a lot of great things happening at Encamp in both the candidate and employee experience. We know that over the last few years, people have innovated. Consistently auditing the employee experience is so important. Is there an innovation in either kind of places that you are most excited to implement at Encamp, and why, that you want to share with folks who are listening?
There's so many. I'm really excited that I can't believe it, as I was, boy, employee number, I don't even know at this point, but um we're nearing 100 employees, which is pretty amazing for us at this stage. And I'm just really, really excited that we have grown diversity. We have gathered so many different levels and different new roles. I'm really excited to start to set some clear JEDI goals. Like, I think I intentionally didn't set any because I'm like, we are not psychologically ready. We need to baseline first. We're not just gonna go
Right.
go crazy on this. Like, we got to give ourselves some time to learn first, and then we can bring in different voice. It happened organically, but now we can really set some goals. So I'm really excited about the possibility of like creating a council, a JEDI council. So cliche. I know, Star Wars, we're nerds. But like creating a group of folks that is gonna review that data, help make plans for the future with regard to our strategy there. And just more systems, more automation, things of that sort. I think about back what I was most excited about when I first started, and it was simply getting a robust applicant tracking system, so that we can actually see data and partnering with groups to be able to get some of that demographic data up front. And so now I'm excited to take it beyond, now that we've got this workforce established, kind of bridge it beyond just that new in-camper incoming experience, and bridge it into more of the sustaining part of the workforce, if that makes any sense. Yeah, there's a lot of fun things. I'm excited. More partnerships with more groups, you know, just so many fun things. But the cool thing about it is that my runway is long because I have so much executive support. So I think that's what's really exciting.
Yeah, that executive support is so critical, especially to JEDI goals and really developing the baseline for your individual organization, understanding what the current state is and planning for the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah.
Knowing kind of what you know now and your experience, how would you kind of finish the sentence of, in order to be a competitive employer today, you need to
Be empathetic. You gotta be empathetic. Like, we cannot, I just, come on, listen to some stories, listen to your people. Like, you've got to lead with empathy. You just do. You have to understand where people are coming from. And, long gone are the days where people are like, my work is my life. Like, I was that girl. Oh my God, I think back at 2017, Brittany, 2017, or even 2013, Brittany was like, I'm gonna take over the world and I will work until midnight, and then I'll sleep in my office, and then I'll wake up and I'll work some more.
yeah.
I was that girl. Like, I was. And I think back, I'm like, what was wrong with me? Why did I care so much? Like, it was not that deep. Like, no, no. So, like, I think leading with empathy, you have to understand that people, yes, you can replace people. Yeah, sure, you can. All right. But at what cost? You know, I've worked at organizations where they grew to a certain point, and I named it losing their soul, but they lost their soul. They sold their soul, and they stopped thinking about people. They only thought about money. You can do both. You really can. And I think that when employers lead with that empathy and understanding the stories, the lives that people are leading, the fact that we are asking people to work in their homes, which may not always be safe spaces, we have to have empathy. And I think that is the one thing I beg companies to have, organizations, is to have empathy throughout every process you build.
Have empathy, listen to stories, actively listen, wait for a response before you think of your response as well. I love that. And I think a lot of people could relate to your story as well when you think about pre 2020 and the role of work
Yeah.
overtaking or playing in lives as well. When we talk about empathy, belonging, JEDI, and especially as a leader and a manager too, when you think about how do you kind of measure your effectiveness as a leader to create that environment for folks.
Yeah. I love my team. I'll first preface that. And I always am asking them, not just how are you doing, which is a very important thing to ask, but how am I doing for you? Am I giving you what you need to be successful, to be, balanced? Do you feel like you know enough? I always ask my, probably to the point of annoyance. So maybe I should ask them if it's annoying that I ask that so much. I don't know. They're very honest with me. Like, Britt, I got it. But like creating this environment where it's not just downward feedback, it is open for upward feedback. And, I beg them for it. And they just usually hit me with the girl, you're doing great. And I'm like, well, that's great, but so I mean, it becomes a big love fest. But they know that door is open should they say, hey, Britt, you're doing a little too much of this. Can you, you know, and it's that open environment because we're all working together. Just because we have different designations and different, my managing them is a task, right? That is a thing that I have to do, but they have ownership in their work too. And so, I think that is how I try to measure the effectiveness as a individual, like person, people leader, as a department leader, again, those tech check bases and quarterly reporting and quarterly surveys, just keeping a good pulse and not thinking just because you don't hear feedback that everything is okay. That's, you have to ask for the feedback.
Absolutely. It doesn't mean things are absolutely perfect. There's nothing to improve on if you're not hearing anything as well and thinking about different kind of reframing of the questions of how are you? How am I showing up for you? How am I doing for you? All of these check-ins are really important. Brittany, is there anything that I didn't directly ask that you want to share with folks listening or any insights you want to underscore? Want to pass the mic back to you?
No, I just hope that people work, culture today is not easy to define, right? And we have to understand that work is just not the most important thing to people anymore. They have lives, and we have to create environments that are not a burden and that can open people up to be creative, because the people have skills and they want to do good work, but we cannot be naive, so naive to think that this isn't also just a livelihood, you know. It's people need money to work. I mean, people need jobs to make money. And so we have to own that and say, okay, but what can we do to make it so that their work life is healthy, so that hopefully they lead happier lives. So that's my takeaway.
I love that. Brittany, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thank you so much. And thank you for even having discussions like these. It's been so great as a consumer to watch them. And so I thank you for inviting me on as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. We appreciate the feedback on the series. And as a reminder, folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood. And know it's a requirement for the business to really succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.